Good. Trying to connect my video with my PC. I seems to have problem doing that.
Sure, doctor. It's good if we can see you as well. Okay, so maybe we start in 2 minutes. We have 2 minutes to run the session. So we are on live right now. Okay, so shall we start right now? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good day to everyone. Welcome to the International Architecture Students Symposium 2022, a joint seminar between the Faculty of Design and Architecture, Universiti Putra, Malaysia, UPM, and the School of Art, Design and Architecture, National University of Science and Technology, NUST, Pakistan. Okay, first of all, let me introduce myself. I am Dr. Sarah Abdul Karim Saleh, a senior lecturer at the Department of Architecture, Faculty of Design and Architecture, Universiti Putra, Malaysia, and I am the moderator for today's symposium. I hope you hear my voice very clearly now. Let me provide a brief on our symposium. Actually, our symposium is just a start for the collaboration between the two universities, Universiti Putra, Malaysia, from Malaysia, and the NUST, National University of Science and Technology, from Pakistan. And actually, one of its goals is to learn from each other, of course, and also to strengthen each other as well. It aims to broaden students' perspective on different and maybe new design skills internationally, and also to improve their critical thinking in an architectural context. So our symposium today actually will involve 8 students from 3 different programs, including a Bachelor of Science in Architecture with Honor, or Part 1, and a Master of Architecture, or Part 2, from Universiti Putra, Malaysia, and Bachelor of Architecture from SADA, or School of Art, Design and Architecture, NUST, Pakistan. So by the end of the day, we will have 4 students or participants from each university. So I would like also to mention that our symposium today is live on our social media platforms such as Facebook and YouTube. So please do not hesitate to join us and share our links as well. Okay, so now without further ado, I'd like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Fakri Zaki bin Jafar, our head of department, the Department of Architecture, Faculty of Design and Architecture, Universiti Putra, Malaysia, to give his welcoming remark. And following him, we will invite architect Safiullah, the head of architecture department at University, at National University of Science and Technology, Pakistan, to give also his welcoming remark. So yes, Dr. Zaki, I pass the mic to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Sarah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome everybody to the symposium, especially to our partner from National University of Science and Technology Pakistan, Mr. Safiullah, and the students and from both universities. Thank you very much for your cooperation and your participation into this International Architecture Student Symposium 2022. Just for your information, this is the second such symposium being held by the department. The first was held last year with the University of Plymouth, United Kingdom. And we had students from both schools presenting their works. And we have also the lecturers and coordinators, giving appraisal of the students' presentation. So this year, alhamdulillah, we have the participation of the National University of Science and Technology Pakistan from the School of Art, Design and Architecture. I like the name, SADA, it's something very strong and powerful. Like in Malay, we call it Sado, strong. But what we have, we hope to have here today is exchange of ideas, of studios, practice, and overall we can learn from each other. I believe such collaboration would make our students and our studios, have wider perspectives on looking at the issues around the globe. We share the same globe, but we are facing different dynamics when we are dealing with the built environment from different countries. So we hope by sharing such an approach, we get a better perspectives of the issues and challenges faced by each school. We have from our department the previous coordinator, because the students presenting today are those who had already completed their studies in the previous semester, and the works presented are from the previous semester. So we have Associate Professor Architect Neo Muhammad Farid, who is organizing, who has been organizing the presentation from the Part 1 students, and also Dr. Wan Srihani Wan Muhammad, who was the coordinators for the Part 2 students. And I was made to understand that for SADA, they only have one 5-year program. They don't have Part 1 and Part 2. We in Malaysia, we mirror the structure of education in the UK, where they have RIBA Part 1 and Part 2. So we hope that today is the first of many other collaboration. I know that SADA has been in talks with our Deputy Dean of Academic, Dr. Zelina Shari, regarding other collaboration that might be possible between the two universities, and I look forward to that. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to welcome the delegation from NUST, and also I thank for our coordinators and our students from both universities for agreeing to participate in such an event. Thank you very much. That's it from me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Zaki, for such inspiring speech. I think now we should pass the mic to SADA part, to Architect Safiullah for his speech right now.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Professor, for your kind words and making this possible. Well, I would like to invite our principal, Architect Sikandar Jamhan, for the welcoming note of today's symposium. Thank you.
I'll keep it short. I'm very glad to welcome everybody here, and this is our initial contact with your university, MPU, and SARDA ourselves. And we decided when we first met that we'll start with small steps first, and then we'll go on to bigger steps if things work out for us. So this is the first small step for us. At SARDA, we lay great emphasis on benchmarking, and it's very important for us. And since our school is a new school from 2010, we started. And we started with benchmarking with our curriculum and other matters with Me Too Turkey. So this is again a series of benchmarking with Malaysian universities. We're already having one benchmarking with another Malaysian university. And it's UMT, we're doing a landscape studio together with them. And hopefully with your university also, we should work out. And it should be more, wish we can have a better collaboration and a win-win situation for both our schools. I think that is what we want to do. We should now see what future collaborations, if this works out successfully, we learn from each other, then maybe we can have more future, better collaborations, more detailed collaborations, which should help both of us. Now, again, I thank this University of Malaysia, Putra University for arranging this collaboration with us. And we're very thankful to the management and the faculty of your university. Thank you. I think we'll go ahead with our collaboration and we'll go ahead with our system. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for Dr. Zaki and for Architect Safiullah and his team for their speech. So now, at the first part of today's symposium, we will have two students from the Bachelor of Science in Architecture with honors, or part one, from UPM, and then you will have also two participants with a Bachelor of Architecture degree from SARA, Pakistan, to present their presentation within 10 minutes. So now I would like to invite the first presenter from the program Bachelor of Science in Architecture with honor, UPM, Adli Shafiq bin Asmadi, to present his final project entitled Meta Portal, a Cycle Through Time. So yes, Adli, mic for you now.
Hello, most disabled participants screen sharing.
So just share your screen and present your slides, Adli.
Yeah, I cannot share the screen because the host disabled me.
Okay, I have enabled the sharing.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Assalamualaikum and very good evening to lecturers and from NUST, Pakistan. And today I would like to presenting. My name is Adli Shafiq bin Asmadi, and I am from Bachelor of Architecture, Part 1, Universiti Putra, Malaysia. And I will be presenting my third year project, which is, I call it Makeup Hotel, a cycle through time. Before that, let me ask you some question. What is a hotel with a theme? Well, what does it mean by theme? Because basically that what we are see at the hotel or what we are feeling at the hotel is just it's just based on the concept without any intangible or tangible feeling towards the hotel. It's just give the feeling of maybe some sort of calmness towards hotel. But for my project, I will be integrating a theme with an intangible concept that gives some sort of historical feeling towards the hotel. So before that, let me bring you to the history of Kampa, which is the site location of my project, which is Kampa. And Kampa is actually well known in their tin mining industry. In general, what can I say from this history? This old town history that creates what's Kampa right now new town, but they are still maintaining their historical tin mining to for the future generation. So from this history, let us deep down on the present studies, which is that I've used towards my design, which is in Nanjing, China, which is the Rural Relation Museum Hotel. This hotel is actually reflected to the its site historical. There's use some as immersive experience towards the spaces and towards the material also. So this will give some sort of intangible feeling that will brings the visitor or the hotel people that can feel the historical feeling of this hotel. And then the second precedent study, which is mentioning about also hotel, but it is mentioned about the crane hotel. This crane hotel is actually previously used as a coal mining machine, but now has been reformed to be the crane hotel. They are maintaining all the materials, the paint, just to reflect to the historical of this coal mining machine at Denmark. So how did I develop my concept, which is from the Kampa and in my Kampa history, integrate with the crane, which is the crane hotel, which I derive it more narrowed down to the tin mining industry. So from this tin mining industry, I narrow it more down to the machinery, which I focus more on the machinery part. What is machinery? It is something that mechanical and mechanism, and there's a portal, which is portal and hotel. Portal is a doorway or gate. What does it mean by a doorway or gate? It is actually what I mentioned just now. It is my hotel will bring the visitor to feel the history of this tin mining industry back then when it is popular or maybe using. So that's why I call my hotel is Makeup Hotel. So from this machinery goes towards the mechanism of this machinery comes the idea of the cycle of machinery, and then because of it is portal, because it brings us towards the one portal that will bring back to the time, which is the cycle of time. So the time is actually something that continual progress and existence, that is an event in the past, present, and future. It is something that people will remember either in the past, present, or future. So the name of this concept is anomaly of time, which is cycle of machinery equals to the cycle of time. Because what is anomaly? Anomaly is something that deviates from its original standards. So that's why it is called anomaly of time, because the idea is to bring back the visitor of this at the hotel towards the historical mining industry of Kampa. Next is the meshing development in general. Because of the idea is from the machinery. So the meshing is to bring the rotating effect of the machinery. Mesh is double just to block the view, and also to bring more richness on the view, on the good view of the site. And also the volume is also volume up because of the blurring the services. And then, but the main important idea of this meshing is actually to show the rotating effect of the machinery. And then comes to the thematic hotel, which is the public spaces of this hotel. There is 5 main public spaces, which is the lobby. They integrate the living history of Kampa. And actually the name of these spaces also reflected to the name of tin mining process, which is the dulang. It is called mendulang, which is a method of separating the tin. And then the dulang cafe, which is the cafe that is floating in the air. And the third one is a time tunnel, the melampan. The melampan is something that, that show the, because it looks like tunnel, so that's why it is called time tunnel, because this space will brings the people to the historical of Kampa from the past, present, and towards the future. And the fourth is the library, the extract. It is also the ones of the extraction of the tin mining. And the last one is the vein. It is the gymnasium. The vein is one of the name of the tin mineral. And we are going to the guest room. There is 5 guest room, which is the Kaolin. The first one, the Kaolin is actually this guest room is named with the tin name, which is the kaolin, the ore, the mica, the feldspar, and the bauxite. These 5 is the type of tin that presents in the Kampa. That this tin type will reflect in the guest room. As you can see from the picture, there is various concept and idea towards the room. And this is the overall site plan that shown the rotating effect of the Kampa, and also there is some in the roof, at the roof, there is some structure that to show the machinery effect. And then this is the ground floor plan. There is open plaza that connected to the lobby. And this is the first floor plan, which is the main area of the hotel that have a gymnasium, library, and gallery. And towards the second floor, there is a few types of room. There is 5 types of room on each floor. This is the 3rd floor, and this is the 4th floor. What's special about this 4th floor? It is the Dulang Cafe, because the cafe is not located at the ground floor or above the or on the floor. It is floating in the air, this Dulang Cafe. What's special about this makeup hotel and this 4th floor is the Dulang Cafe. So this is the section. As you can see from this section, there is richness in the structural exposition here, because just to the mimic the idea of machinery of the tin Kampa, tin mining. Sorry, this is also just to reflect to the idea of tin mining industry in Kampa. As you can see from this elevation, the structural part is exposed just to reflect the concept, and there is the inside is more gloomy because or maybe dark, just to give the sense of feeling that going back to time, back in time, what is the tin mining happened back then. So this is the south elevation. This is the back view of the makeup hotel, which is less opening, just to block the back view. This is the main view, which is the east elevation. And as you can see at the center there, there is exposed lift, just to show the effect of the machinery. Not just the machinery of the lift, but the machinery, the structural part of the beauty of the structural part of this lift. This is the west elevation. And the passive design strategy used here is a self-shading building, because of there is many cantilevered building, many cantilevered towards the upper floor, so that below floor below will not get much light glare. There is less natural light glare towards the inside. And this is the view towards the time tunnel, the museum, which is I call the Melampan. will bring the people and the visitor towards the glory era of the tin mining industry. This is the library. This is the extract. This is the view towards the gym, which is the vein. As you can see here, the light, there is like a laser light. It is symbolized the vein that reflect the idea of the name of the tin mine, tin types. And this is the exterior view. As you can see there is Dulang Cafe, which what I mentioned just now, that is the Dulang Cafe, which is floating in the air. And at the plaza of below there, people will see and visitor will see also the beauty part of the Dulang Cafe, which symbolize the tin mining industry. And this is towards the main lobby view. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Adli. It's really interesting project, interesting presentation. Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite our second presenter, also from the program of Bachelor of Science in Architecture with honors, Chiu Ji, to present his project entitled Belonging. So yes, Chi, the mic with you right now.
Hi, doctor, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, your voice is clear. Just share your slides and present within 10 minutes, please. Thank you.
All right. Right. Hi, good afternoon to everyone and my fellow friends from UPM and NUST. I'm Z, and it's a great pleasure and honor to be here today. And I will be presenting my project from my last semester, which I named as Belonging. And my site is similar with the first presenter. It's located in Kampar, Perak. And coincidentally enough, it is my hometown that I lived for the past 2 decades. And we are to propose the same project, which is a thematic hotel. And there's actually a tremendous amount of things that I want to explain about the site, but since I've been located only about 10 minutes only, shall make it short and simple. And the first thing first, it's a local landmark, Grand Kampar Hotel, located at the northeast side of our site. Stood 10-story high and among all low-rise shophouses around it, and with its distinguished Spanish architecture style, it is a focal point of the vicinity. Secondly, Westlake Kampar, located at the far northwest side, offers a great view. And thirdly, would be a slight introduction of our site. Our site is located in Kampar, and Kampar is divided into New Town and Old Town. And our site is located in New Town. I'll be explaining their difference shortly. The shop lot surrounding the site is a unique feature itself. It implements European architecture language. The business comprises of cyber cafes, reading lounge, hypermarkets, printing shops, etc. And a little info about Kampar is that majority of the people there is Chinese, followed by Malay and Indian. And Kampar is an educational hub itself. Therefore, the people there comprises, the majority of people there comprises of youngsters. And for the strength is that our site is at the center of businesses, and we would like to foster the cycling culture there. And the weakness is that it lacks shades and public space. The opportunity is that it is potential to have an open plaza and green space. However, for the threat is that the night is silence, and people often relate darkness with danger, hence low sense of security. And enough of the analysis. Let's jump to the synthesis. This is a collage that I made that represents the idea of turning the nighttime to become a place with strong cultural value and interactive gathering place. I'm a local in Kampar, and when we had our site visit in Kampar, it reminds me of my childhood in Kampar. It reminds me of how fast my hometown has changed and developed throughout the years. And during the site visit, I've perceived bits and pieces that I have not paid attention to. I'm attached to Old Town, and now there is the New Town, which is totally different with the Old Town. In terms of the architecture language itself, it's totally different. The New Town has a European architecture style, while the Old Town uses vernacular shop house. In Old Town, we still have this kind of watchmaker shop, which I remember my grandpa brought me here to fix my watch. And then I remember having this kind of old grocery shops that I always fantasizing about buying each kind of snacks and biscuits. And back then, they don't have fancy packaging. They only have these metal containers that you need to use the spoon to crack it open. And then there's this bus stop that I used to wait for bus after tuition classes, and now it is gone. It's moved to the New Town. And then there's this old TV that you need to give a few love smack for it to turn on magically. And then there's this coffee shop that my grandpa used to bring me to. And this kind of, and there's this old tradition, old coffee shop where you can see and smell the coffee and then hear the clanking of sound of pots. And compared to now in Starbucks, they just shout your name and you pick up at the counter. It's totally different. And there's these old shop houses where people live above and then carry out business activity at the ground floor. And this kind of, this period is the period where you know your neighbors well, and then it forms a nice little neighborhood community. I then began to research on vernacular shop houses, particularly the lifestyles, how people live, and the elements of it, like the airwell and the 5-feet walkway, and the evolution of shop houses in Malaysia, and influenced by Roman arches, Islamic floral motifs, Chinese material, and the clay tiles, roofs, and so on. It is a mixture of different culture, and just like Malaysia. During the past, the streets are for the people. People set up stores along the streets, walk around the streets, and then the cars have to give way to the people. And then why not we have a street inside the building I'm going to propose? And that's the coffee shop. People used to gather there. And why not I suggest a place, a rest stops for people to gather around in my building as well. And then during the past, not every household has a privilege to own a television. So people gather around one person's house and then they watch the football together or TV shows together. So why not we have a public theater and art performance area so that everyone can watch together. And during the past, we will have food and hawker stores along the streets. So why not we have this kind of same elements in the building as well. So I've reached my design approach. So as you can see, I have a street tilted along an exit that opens up to an opening that creates an opening to the Grand Gambas Hotel, the local landmark, which has an implied meaning that it connects to the present, the old that connects to the present, the past to the present. And then there's a plaza that opens up to the lake, the West Lake, if you remember. So if my building that builds up enough with enough height, it can oversee the great view at the West Lake. This is the design development. Firstly, I've the exist, ingress and egress ready, and then I introduce a street that breaks the mass into two. And then I introduce an identity for the building, which the curvy roof is derived from the traditional clay tile roofs from vernacular shop houses. And then with a little bit of facade treatment, some voids and solids, and it becomes nice. This is the design outcome. Firstly, there's a street along at the center that opens up to this junction. And at the ground floor, it's fully public. There will be coffee shops and then shops, lots. The general intention in designing the ground floor is that it would be inviting and welcoming to the people. People from the road can access to the coffee shop and then into the street, while the people come along the street. You have the view open towards the coffee shop as well. So it's like a double frontage. Moving on to the first floor plan, when we build up in height, then the space changed from public to a private space. So on the first floor plan, we will have private spaces like the accommodation suites and a mixture of public spaces like reading lounge for students, because Kampa is an educational hub, and then there's coffee shop, which we local call it kopitiam. And then for the second floor, we will have rows of the accommodation suites, and same with third floor plan. And with the fourth floor plan, we will have a rooftop bar that faces the northwest side, which you can have a great view towards the West Lake. I have several types of hotel suites. So with this kind of different type of hotel suites arrangement, so it creates depths on the facades. This is a section. So the ground floor would be shops, a public space, and then built up higher would be a private space for accommodation suites. This is a sectional perspective. We will have a street at the center. So the ground floor would be fully public, double frontages that invite people to come to this place. Well, if you live up there, you can oversee these crowded and busy streets that enjoy this kind of little neighborhood community here. That's what I'm trying to achieve in this design. This is the isometric view of the building from each side and the elevation. So I play with different heights, so it creates different heights and depths so that the facade will not look boring. So the outcome is that on each four sides, the view is quite interesting. I figure out that exploded diagram really helps you to experience the space. So on the ground floor, the double frontages, the street that splits the mass into two. And on the first floor, you can see there's numerous accommodation suites. They are arranged in a way that they will leave a certain small space in between them to create a green pocket to invite ventilations and light into the building. And for this is the second floor plan, second floor isometric. Same again, it comprises of accommodation suites, but with green pockets in between the suites. Then on the third floor, we will have a sky bridge. And if you notice the facade, I tend to review the services like the air conditioner unit. So people tend to conceal it nowadays, but during the past, people make it as an element on the facade itself, like the advertisement board, the planter box, and French awnings, and advertisement boards, and the air conditioner units. They make up the elements on the facades. This is a fourth floor plan, and this is the topmost floor with rooftop bar on top. So in Malaysia, we are a tropical country. We have a lot of rain, so we need large overhangs to cover the space. This is the interior perspective. So what I want to achieve here is that I want to break the norm of typical hotels, like typical hotel rooms. So what I want to create here is a hotel that makes you feel like home itself. Therefore, I reached the end of my presentation. And for now, I want to explain why I named my project as Belonging. It has two meanings. First is it represents my sense of belonging to this Kampa, to this place. And secondly, it means belonging. It is a period of time that I want to go back to, but we can't reverse time, we can't go back. So what I can do is only be yearning and be longing of this era. And by the way, this is a sectional perspective cut that cuts along the street. So you can see the shop lots on the ground floor, while there's a nice little community neighborhood on top of the ground floor that makes up the upper floors. And thank you. This is, if you want to have a look again, then you may access it with this QR code. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gili. It really looks interesting concept and project. Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite the first participants from Sada, NUST Pakistan. She's holding a Bachelor of Architecture, Amina Qayyum, to present her final project entitled Second Nature Nature Interpretation Center. So yes, Amina, can you present right now?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. Could you please confirm if you can hear me clearly?
Yes, we are hearing you clearly. Go ahead, please. You have 10 minutes.
I'm just going to share my screen. Please let me know if it's visible.
Yes, it's clear and visible.
All right, so I'm from Sada NUST, and today I'll be presenting my bachelor's thesis called Second Nature. My thesis is based on this idea of phenomenology in architecture. So before just getting into the building, we just really need to go over what that is exactly. So what's architectural phenomenology? Well, these people, they're the forefathers of modern phenomenology. And essentially they had these really confusing views on what phenomena is. But to simplify what they were saying, phenomena is simply a practice that understands perception. So you would take the lived experiences of the people and you would display them in your architectural spaces. So just taking a look at one of the visuals from my thesis, the intersection of phenomenology and architecture would not just be the letting in of light into your building, but the how and the why of the quality of light in your building. As in, why is it screened? Why is it diffused? What does it mean? So one way to exhibit experience is to understand your context. This here is my school, Sada, but just to help you understand is that the concrete structure is not where the phenomena lies, but rather the experiences, perceptions, and associations of the people with this building. And that's what this concept sketch shows. Underneath the built realm, there is a whole realm of subconscious associations which have the potential to be manifested in design. And it's in those forgotten experiences where we find human experience. So how did I go about that? So to understand that, we have to see the subconscious experience I focused on. So I live here in Islamabad, and here we have this eco-grid that you can see here that runs under this pretty 2 by 2 kilometer vehicular grid. So as a resident of this city, you don't really perceive this eco-grid while you're traveling on the vehicular grid. So that is something that has fallen into the subconscious of the people. And interestingly, in the initial planning of the city, they wanted these ravines to be a very integral part of the lifestyle here. It was something that was supposed to be explorative, nurturing, and recreative. And here I kind of created these sketches to sort of showcase what the initial reality was supposed to be. But the thing is, what's happening in the current situation is that these ravines have just deteriorated in these carriers of urban filth. And in that sense, they are really just thought of as a nuisance to the city life and not really very important anymore. Hence, the focus of my thesis surrounds the uplifting of that forgotten network of streams in Islamabad and bringing it back into the public perception. For this, the typology of a nature interpretation center was sought after as a means to encapsulate the beauty in this natural attitude. So this is the program list, but really, in short, there were some primary programs and secondary programs. Primarily, I wanted to create an envelope which captured the feeling of walking by these ravines and the natural flora of the place. And I did that through the creation of these biomes, which I represented through these sketches. And secondly, I wanted my building to play a part in purification of that wastewater, which was infiltrating the ecogrid through a series of self-cleaning constructed wetlands. I'm not really saying that the building claims to fix all of Islamabad's problems, but rather it is meant to highlight the beauty of these forgotten spaces and the need to preserve them. So this is coming up the site. The site itself is pretty fitting for a nature interpretation center in the sense that it is this beautiful historic garden in Islamabad, which is well connected to the urban realm through a series of pedestrian and vehicular linkages. It fulfilled the requirements of an existing space where there was already a fondness for the environment and all its natural elements. It's a space where people, So it's a space where people of all ages come together as a collective to sit amongst its trees or to occupy its open spaces. But due to human interventions, the site still is deteriorating quite rapidly. So this is actually a documentation of the stream that's passing through my site. And this white fluff is actually chemical waste that is released into the stream water. So I felt that my nature interpretation center could help purify the site, but also bring together the community and showcase why it's important to preserve these spaces, especially because Islamabad is nicknamed as Islamabad the Beautiful or the City of the Streams. So the way the people interacted with the site was noted, and only 4 techniques were extrapolated. And the entire building was built keeping in mind how people were interacting with the site and how the natural factors played a part in accentuating this experience. So that intangible experience was translated into the building envelope. And finally, the design synthesis. So the focus for today is going to be the biomes, which are going to exhibit that botanical diversity that we see in ravines. This idea of permaculture, which talks about the recycling of organic waste generated from the various entertainment areas to propagate plant life, and the upcycling studio. So this is how the building actually sits within the site. Next to it, we have that rose and jasmine garden, which is a very geometric form. I haven't really included any parking in the site area because I wanted people to walk and make their way through the garden and into my building, experiencing the sights, sounds, and feels of the garden. The only parking would be the existing parking for the garden, but that's pretty much it. The programs are strewn across the built form, creating a journey as you travel from the sweet-smelling garden to overlooking the stream passing through the site. The floral and wet and dry biomes are all located next to the relevant markers on site. The form was optimized to bring in this idea of porosity, this idea of light, and vantage points through leveling. So let's talk about the entrance. I wanted people to experience the beauty of the flora of the garden and the sacredity of these spaces within Islamabad. I wanted to capture the feeling of light breaking through the leaves. And hence, moving from that brightly lit landscape of the garden, owing to the short heighted flowers here, we come into the low light of the interior that I designed. And that talks about a certain level of sacredity as well. The rustic material palette, the open and ambiguous spaces of the entrance, it is what greets you upon entry. Nothing is set in stone, and you're allowed to explore as you will. So this is just an animation of how the light starts to filter in, and it starts to give way into some of the first biomes. So the first biome had to be special. I wanted it to be related to that garden that people just walked through. So the first biome was going to be the floral biome. Here, the native flora of the ecogrid are represented in low-lying modules. And the reason they are low-lying is to mimic that short heightened flowers of the garden. But more importantly, right here, you can see that when they come closer to inspect these colorful beings, you catch the first sight of this stream flowing through the site, encapsulated by this mirage of flowers reminiscent of the original eco-grids of Islamabad. The architectonics of the space have been kept very minimal to prevent any obstructions to the view of the water. Essentially, the entire building is about framing this body of water from different instances. The plantation throughout the complex is kept alive through a series of hidden techniques, which regulate the temperature and moisture content within these enclosures while being invisible to the users. So this would be in the form of these chilled slabs and porous roofing for temperature control, as well as specifically designed modules. So showcasing the water is when I decided it's time to feed into that curiosity and create that wet biome next. This comprises of plants that require a high moisture content to survive. The wet biome is special because it spans across two levels. The user sees it from a higher vantage point before getting to experience it in person. And it's these playful hints of what's to come which keep the user moving forward. These voids and vantage points where you peer into the biome first before making your way to the lower levels to experience it. From a design point of view, the winds are channelized through a special wintry screen that you can see over here. The air is cooled once it's passed over a series of ponds within the biome, causing evaporative cooling, and that reduces the temperature loads inside the building. Here you can see the leveling design for the wet biome and the thatch roof that's constructed with aqua reed. And this plant is only found near stream water in Islamabad. So that was a special consideration on top of this biome. Next is the dry biome, which is characterized by plants that do not require a higher moisture content. The dry biome is purposefully placed next to the tree enclosures on site so that when you stand here, it feels like a continuation of that tree line. An understanding of solar orientation ensures that light always breaks through the tree canopies before being allowed inside the building. This is what the tree line looks like in various seasons. So the first one is a more recent documentation, and the second one picture is when I was actually conducting my thesis. Next up is the network of bridges that connect these two portions of the building, allowing you to once again, as you can see here, once again walk over that stream water and become acquainted with the site. All three biomes are experienced through a similar series of bridges, creating alternating solids and voids within the design. This image here showcases how you would actually cross the bridge and where the trees are located so that you would be always connected to them. Next up is the permaculture garden. The permaculture garden is really an extension to the cafe spaces within the design. The idea is that the organic waste that typically finds itself in Islamabad's ravines is used as fertilizers for plantation within the building. Organic waste is recycled through these drum-like composting bins shown here. This allows the community to reflect on where the waste that they produce ends up and what they're going to do about it. And finally, we have the waste upcycling area, which is really just an open-air creative studio where inorganic waste collected from various points around the site is sanitized and repurposed by the community. It not only acts as a creative outlet for the community living around the garden, but also one of the first public ventures for the citizens of Islamabad. Some links were made with the adjoining Apara market, which was a major source of inorganic waste coming into the site. So collection points could be created here so that they can be repurposed in my building. And that's pretty much it for me. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Amina. It really looks interesting presentation and project. So now I'd like to invite the second participant from NUST Pakistan, Rija Hashimi, and she will present her final thesis project as well with the title Adaptive Interventions Symposium in Architecture. So I pass the mic to Rija.
Assalamualaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes, your voice is clear, so please present within 10 minutes.
Yes. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, it's clear.
All right. Okay, so my name is Rija Hashmi. The title of my thesis is Additive Intervention Symbiosis in Architecture. So I'll be going through all of these today. My thesis statement states basically it's a project about additive interventions on architecture. So it's additive interventions on architecture conceived in evolution to introduce a new typology. And basically it's to enhance the experience of a communal space, creating a synergistic performance hub. So essentially the typology is a performance hub, and it's a symbiotic take on what's already existing on site. So the concept was essentially what I wanted to explore was symbiosis. And I wanted to explore it in a way where I take an existing form or an existing program and I introduce a new, more developed or more evolved typology of it. So symbiosis in its natural definition would mean an involving interaction between two different organisms. So symbiosis is a biological concept, and it has to do with a association between two vastly different organisms and how they create a mutually beneficial relationship. How it can be translated into architecture is in a mutualistic relationship where both symbionts, the existing building and the new intervention in this case, would have different physiognomies. That means a different spatial formal logic or material expression. But essentially, they are both coexist and are and help each other grow. So the objectives that I wanted to so the objectives that I wanted to achieve with my thesis were to complete unfinished architecture, to form a dialogue between new and existing, to reinterpret typology, to return a communal space to the users as a precedential model for future development, and then to explore how the digital era enhances architecture, which would lead to producing an immersive environment in terms of continuity and enhancing the user experience, and then to explore the dichotomy between two symbionts. The site that I chose is in the capital city of Pakistan, Islamabad, and it is a site that is situated right at the center of a natural reserve called Shakarpadiya. Now, Shakarpadiya is essentially just a contoured piece of land which has been zoned as a natural reservoir and is one of the largest public parks, recognized public parks in Islamabad. Now, this building itself is a cultural complex that was that's surrounded by multiple other tourist destinations, and the project essentially, now this kind of shows a timeline of how essentially the area was designated for this already constructed building that I'm working on. Essentially, it's an adaptive reuse project. So in 2004, the area was marked for the cultural complex. In 2009, the construction was stopped, and this is what you see. So your natural reservoir is essentially gone, and in its place is multiple concrete structures creating a complex. And in 2021, when I began this thesis, was when this is what the site looked like. So a lot of the natural reserves have come back, but you still see the sparsely populated concrete structures remaining from the complex itself. So the original, on the left side, you can see the original proposed plan that was essentially the design that the architect had given for this complex. which consisted of restaurants and coffee shops and amphitheaters. However, on the right, you can see what's left of the site, what was essentially built, and how the project was abandoned mid-construction. So you see that the amphitheater was not constructed, only the foundations were laid out. The performance hall is fully constructed, it's only awaiting finishes. And then the Bethit area, Bethit is essentially a gathering space, an outdoor gathering space that's fully constructed, but nothing else on the site has been constructed. And the main gates that were essentially allotted were never put in place. Instead, people started using these sites for essentially abusing these sites, because they'd come here for there was a lot of drug use or etc. in these places, and so essentially they created their own elephant paths, which then essentially led my design to. So in site mapping, what's currently existing, you can see that these are really large concrete structures that are sparsely located, and they have no formal connections between them in terms of our landscaping. So when I started looking at the site, and I started seeing which of the concrete structures I could utilize to essentially build my thesis on. So the idea was to activate this site, because it's been left abandoned for 13 years. So I started analyzing the site, and the first thing I saw was there was a blind turn on the main road, which then cuts through the entire natural reservoir of Shakarpanya. So once you come to this, you essentially lose all contact with the concrete structures that are placed on this land. So I decided to give access to both sides before the blind turn reached, and then there were vendors sitting on this on the main entrance. So I decided to give the main entrance from the site as well. Then to allow for future completion of the amphitheater, essentially which has already been zoned on this plot, I decided to leave that area out of my area of intervention. And that's how I came up with the selected site area. Now, these are the existing concrete structures that are existing on this site. So you can see that the first image on the left is our piazza, or like the Betrick space. And then we have the performance hall, which consists of the performance hall, the conference hall, and the seminar halls. And then I also did a structural analysis, of course, because the structure has already been built, and I am now reusing it and activating this area. So these are just a few images of the site. You can see how introverted this site is, which is quite odd, as it's placed in a natural reservoir, and there are scenic views on all sides of it. And so that is one consideration that I took into my own design, and how the main entrance onto site is not celebrated enough. And so you can barely see the concrete structures inside, as on the rightmost image on the sheet. So this was a timeline that I came up with of what exactly happened on site. So in 2004, the planning was initiated. In 2007 and 8, construction was initiated on site. However, in 2009, the construction was abandoned. And in 2010, the project was essentially supposed to be completed by 2010, but it wasn't. And so in 2012, 13, and 17, all of these different programs that were initially zoned on this site were now placed on other neighboring tourist destinations in the neighboring Arts and Crafts Village or the Pakistan Monument, which are also very big tourist destinations. So these programs were now moved outwards, and so this leaves room to introduce more programs on this site and replace the ones that were existing, or build a better connection. And so once I started looking at all of the different programs that I could introduce on this site, which were still in line with performing arts, but also that were more relevant to today's age, I came up with gaming and installations, and if I could do something with the digital age and how I can introduce that on this site. And so these are the four common aspects that are common between performing arts and then gaming, essentially. So once I started looking at how I can build a connection with the existing building that I have on site. Now, this is part of my research of how Bolek, the author, introduced how she came up with all of these different possibilities of how you can create these connections with an existing site, and how you can essentially move on to reusing a building. And the one that I came up with was a parasite, essentially because then you're activating that space, and then your intervention is essentially the main part of it, or is your intervention is essentially the main aspect of it, and it's just essentially feeding off of the existing concrete structure. Now, the transitions that I created, now this is something that I extracted from my concept. Now, this is how a physical and a digital age are different. Now, in terms of immersion, in all of my illustrations, you could see that in terms of immersion, the first one in a physical space, you have all of these different barriers, you have all of these physical barriers, but in a digital age, you essentially don't have those. You can, these are systems and design interactions by which users exist and interact, and users feel like they're inside, like a performer instead of an audience. However, when you come to a presence, you can teleport instantaneously between spaces, and the virtual reality or virtual real-time rendering of surrounding will adapt to it. And in place, a digital place, a city as we know it is no longer static, constantly evolving organism that can be morphed based on demographics and actions. So these are essentially how I then extracted my form finding. Now I started placing all of these aspects on my site, and we come to my form findings. So I just defined my axes, which were also taken from the existing paths, the existing elephant paths, as I mentioned in my site analysis. And then infill. So I started looking at my concrete structures, and I started looking at where I can expand my site and where I can identify the voids for a parasitic or a symbiotic attachment. Then I started with the point of generation, my central point from where to identify a geometric center, and then to extrapolate axes from there. Then to generate those axes in terms of my heights, in terms of taking landform into consideration. Then to define language, I took my form according to the landform, but I decided to contrast it to the existing structure on site so that it could be a marker for passive users as well, and it could pique their interest to come onto site and explore. And then to raise this, and then I started looking at the landform and to raise the form to cater to the increasing contour ahead of the performance hall, and raised form from the center of the complex to allow circulation to the rest of the complex if they decide to build onto the rest of the complex in the near future. And then we start building a performer audience relationship with the passive user in a solid void place. So these were all of my maquettes in where I was essentially experimenting with form finding. And so this is essentially very close to my final form. Now the final form essentially is a symbiotic structure that is then attached to a concrete structure, but it really does take into account the rest of the structures that are present on site, and it takes into account the existing circulation on site as well. So this is a master plan that I came up with. So over here, you can see that in the left-hand image, that is basically our studio spaces and our exhibition spaces. So I mentioned that the original building is very introverted. It has no access to the outside in terms of, it doesn't have any views to the outside. And so in the blue ones marked here are introverted spaces, or like our exhibition spaces where your focus is more towards the inside. But as I'm introducing the studio spaces, which is essentially along this, if I go back, along this red loop that you can see. So along this red loop is essentially how your experience changes. So you first go through all of your studio spaces, you learn how your transition from physical to a digital world is happening. And then in the exhibition spaces at the top, you start seeing your digital exhibitions. And on the right, you can see your introverted and extroverted spaces. And so the orange ones are your introverted spaces. But as I build onto this structure, my spaces start getting more extroverted, and you start getting more interaction with the site as well. And so you're utilizing the site more efficiently than it was being used before. And these are the sections I came up with. So in terms of the digital reflection on the facade, you can see that the existing structure is shown in orange lines in the section, but the intervention, the intervention over here, you can see that it is, so the intervention over here is that you can see that it's basically in night mode, you can start seeing all of these digital facades, but during the day mode, it's a reflective facade. So it's reflecting your nature all around you. But also, if the users keep visiting the site all throughout the year, they will have different experiences every time they come. And so that really does play a very important part in the experience that this generates for the user in terms of the entire transformative space that I am creating for them. from existing to an intervention. And so you start seeing all of these spatial formal logics that have been put into play in terms of this design. So there's lots of interconnectivity between all of these spaces. There's a response to context. So the central space, the geometric center, is essentially where your response to context or programmatic zoning is essentially starting from. And then your extroverted spaces have an access to site as well. And the form itself has movement and directionality that respects the site in its own. And so you have materiality changes, you have seamless transitions between all spaces, and then you have this one main space where essentially you become part of the installations. And so that's the digital immersion reaches its maximum. And so these are a few renders where you can start seeing all of these different connections that are being formed. This looping path takes you through all of your public spaces first, and then you start having access. While you don't have access to this private path, you can still see it, and you can see all of the activities going on. And so this is how circulation goes on. So you go from your studios to your digital exhibits. This is the main collaboration space where all of your paths essentially look down into this space. Then this is one introverted space being formed. And then this is the projection-based space where you become part of the installation, and your shadows essentially, or you are guiding the installation. Then this is essentially the final form. And these different cores are what I've kind of differentiated with. So the core outside is a very natural core, but like the inside core has a digital vertical connection like this. So its installation is essentially connecting architecture vertically. And these are all of my symbiotic attachments. This is what the form would essentially look like at night, so it would still act as a marker. And that is my thesis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rija. Actually, it's really impressive how you have been developed your spacing and concept. It's really interesting project. Thank you very much once again. Okay, so at the second part of today's symposium, we have two other participants with a Master of Architecture degree from Universiti Putra, Malaysia, or part 2, and also two participants with a Bachelor degree in Architecture from Sada, Pakistan. So now let me invite our participant from Master of Architecture UPM, Lim Siu Ni, to present her final thesis project entitled Exhibition of Mind, Broadening the Urban Care Boundaries Toward Youth. So please, Lim, can you just present your presentation, also introduce first yourself and show your video to us? You have 10 minutes to present. Thank you very much.
Hi, okay, good evening. So I'll start sharing my screen. Can you guys see my screen clearly?
Not yet. Okay, now can.
Okay. So, okay, good morning, good evening, everyone. So my name is Lim Siu Ni, and I'm from Universiti Putra, Malaysia. And I'm here to share my master final thesis project with the title of Extension of Mind, Broadening the Urban Care Boundaries Towards Youth. So this thesis is about emphasizing a strong engagement and relationship between the mental processes in an architectural environment. So starting with the background study, the triggers of the mental illness, as you can see, the human visibility is being reduced as more populations are flocked into the urban living. However, many do not realize the risk for getting the mental disorder, such as the depression, especially towards the youth community. 1 in 5 of youth are experiencing mental health condition, yet most of them remain undiagnosed and untreated. The reason behind this is because historically, the healthcare has actually often sent a heavy message about living in a structured environment, the surveillance between the nurse and the doctors, and also creating formulating all these social boundaries. It is conceived as a functional place rather than a living space, as the aesthetic quality has been replaced by the functionality. Similar to the current living environment in the urban setting, as you can see from the diagram, the standardized infrastructure has actually brought upon the mass culture, which leads to fostering the sense of placelessness, and the institutionalized and disciplined setting also frame up the youth movement, where the environment is dominated by the observation and barriers. So this curated a setting that has isolated the youth from daily social spaces, and the structural environment has diminished the youth individualism. So the functionalist approach has resulted a similarity in the current healthcare appearance, and the standardized community infrastructure has actually formed a border vacuum in the neighborhood itself that affect the neighborhood vitality. Hence, the question arises whether how can we break the invisible social boundaries in the healthcare setting and the possibilities of strengthening the youth participation through the tailor-made community infrastructure. So this leads to my thesis framework, which aims to reshape the borders of care by crossing the invisible and visible boundaries and restructure a new model of care center by bringing back the neighborhood memory in the youth discourse. So in attempt to investigate the relationship between architecture and the memories and identify how does all these collective memories, the youth movement, daily experience can be translated into the spatial qualities. So the main building program will be emphasized on the youth daily activities, rehabilitations, mental restoration through the health and learning facilities. So the chosen site is located in Cheras, which is a suburb of Kuala Lumpur that borders between the two states. This fits the site criteria that depicting the aspect of the urban life. The site surrounding is dominated by the residential district and the healthcare facilities, which will also facing the issue of neighborhood expansion due to the generation gain and densely populated by the housing development. So the Taman Mida will be the selected neighborhood, and it has a close proximity to the hospital, which is over this side, and also the housing development. So they also have a dilapidated open spaces that are scattered within the neighborhoods. So the site are actually broken down into 3 smaller parts, which will then connecting to the main site at the center. So the site will serve as a recollection of space by connecting the surrounding nodes to create a more responsive environment. So the massing of the building itself is to lower down the building volume by cutting down the building mass vertically to enhance the visual visibility to the surrounding context. Next is to densify the building horizontally. So the volumetric complexity are formed through a rupture of blocks in a smaller scale. So this one can be referred to a city made of rooms model. Another one is to create the 3 sites with the suspended movement. So this is to maximize the circulations and the point of contact within this neighborhood. And this mass movement also allows to create a fluid event within these 3 sites. So this one is the conceptual sketches to express the design resembling the ideas of creating the architecture beyond the walls and floors, spatial recognitions, and responsive environment. So the intention is to deinstitutionalize the building itself by creating a wall into a different type of volume, which is to create a wall rooms, and also break out into in-between spaces between each wall. The spatial recognition is to creating a curvature movement that enhance the slow thinking within when surrounding the sites, and also to create a sense of familiarity in the spatial transitions. The responsive environment is to complex the ground perimeter from the ground floor, and also to create a natural surveillance in between these 3 sites. So the observation pods will be injected in surrounding the area. So this one is the overall site plan. So you can see the site is actually surrounded by the highly dense neighborhood. So this will be surrounded with the densely neighborhood. So with the community infrastructure as well. This is the community center with existing community center and the playground. So this intention is to enhance the community infrastructure at the site itself and bring it back to the main center. So the ground floor plan is mainly focusing on the program with the preventive care and aftercare program. And the intention of the building is to create a sacred geometry of circle surrounding these three sites with no defined beginning or an end. It acts as a symbol of infinity that represents the stability and unity for the community. And also intended to provide a wall street in between all this building itself. The extended wall will open a plurality of direction and maximize the interaction between the all spaces. Afterwards, it's continuous connected with a single continuous path, which leads to the center and also breaking up the rhythm of the public space. So the intention is to breaking up a big public spaces into a smaller parts so as to create a different movement creating surrounding the site. So the network of deinstitutionalized spaces will act as an extension from the surrounding facilities, and the activities reflect the contextual behavior of the community itself. So this one is from the entrance, the site entrance. So the idea is to create a curvature movement building at the entrance with the texture material to engage a sensory tactile experience. Going up to the first floor, the building itself is actually breaking out into a smaller building plots to create a multiple entry point and also to blur the boundaries between the hill and the play. So the treatment of the facilities will be connected to the play element as well. So the one in the pink is the walkway to connect the other two sites, so as to also providing natural surveillance with the observatory pods along the route. So from the route, you can see there is a lot of sense of the smell of fragrant flowers injected along the sides to permeate the environment, which will also help to trigger the navigations to the surrounding. And the senses also act as a role of the healing itself, which act as a way of creating emotional memories among the youth. So this one will be looking as a meditation trail, connecting the three sites. This one will be the observatory boards going down to the ground floor. So it will act as a play element as well for the youth. And the layers of wall streets are also triggered the sensory play element for the youth. So this one is the elevated running trail, which is also softening the indoor and outdoor boundaries. So going up to the second floor will be the living quarters for the youth with the mental illness. So the idea is also to deinstitutionalize the care in between the building blocks rather than confining all the spaces in the same place. So the openness and the porosity of the wall are breaking up the monotonous texture of the reflective surface in the conventional living unit, like you can see from the hospital. So the idea is that the building is actually opening up to the other levels. So this is also to prioritize the local materials and to create a homely atmosphere in the building itself. So this one is the overall section. So the taxonomy of the boundary are actually confining into different types of sensation, which is starting from the curiosity with the orientation of the route, bringing up to the unity of the observatory pod, and also going up to the other places for the healing process. So from the section, you can see that the lower ground floor is the de-escalation space. So this one is creating a low sense of movement before they are entering up to a more active spaces. So this one is the journey experience of the overall building. So the first intention is to attract the youth by providing a lot of play element at the entrance at multiple points. Afterwards, we create excitement of the movement in between the route. Afterwards, then moving on will be connecting the kinships to act as a cohesion between the youth community and the other public spaces as well. Afterwards, we'll be controlling the youth movement with the natural surveillance, moving up to the meditations and also the intimacy of the space. So the program itself is breaking up into 3 programs: the in-care, preventive care, and also aftercare. And these are the elements that forming up the intention of the spaces. So that's all for my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, Lim, thank you very much for your presentation. It's really looks very professional and interesting project. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now I would like to invite the second participant from Master of Architecture, UPM Part 2, Tanyan Xian, to present her final thesis project as well, entitled Her Center, a safe sanctuary for domestic violence survivors toward rebuilding life. So please, Tan, can you share your presentation? But first, I would like to ask you to introduce yourself and, if possible, to share your video.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can see my screen. My name is Yan. Today, I'm here to share my architecture thesis project, which I title Her Center, Healing, Empowerment, and Recovery Towards a Safe Sanctuary for the Domestic Violence Survivors Towards Rebuilding Life. So first of all, looking back at the background studies of the domestic violence in Malaysia, it is not a new phenomenon. However, it remains as an underreported and under-researched social issue according to the Ministry of Home Affairs Malaysia. World Health Organization, WHO, acknowledged that DV is a serious public health and human rights issues. And domestic violence is any behavior or act that causes physical, psychological, sexual, economic, and spiritual harm to those in relationships. Studies also have shown that domestic violence increase when families are together for extended period of time. For example, the recent COVID-19 pandemic lockdown, which has seen a spike increase of reported DV cases. And this increased the threats against women's physical and emotional safety in the home, which limits their access to seek help. The effects of domestic violence range from physical health, and also psychological and emotional problems, and also serious effects on the children's well-being as well, indirectly. So throughout a sequence event experienced by the victims, it is important to note that not all scars are visible. This had caused women in facing post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, in which the victim will tend to generalize all similar experiences in the future and link it to their past trauma, and hinders their ability to cope with day-to-day life. So this is some of the precedent studies of the domestic violence home shelters in Malaysia. So similarly, all these shelters, they are providing temporary shelters, and they provide basic services such as food and clothing and counseling facilities. However, what are the shortcomings of the current facilities available in Malaysia? So the existing shelters are mostly makeshift building, as you can see from the images above. They are converted from the original building usage. And in Malaysia, there's only 43 shelters nationwide. And according to the minimum international minimum standards, we need at least 340 shelters more to house the women of the domestic violence in Malaysia. And the homes are over capacity and inadequate resources in terms of skilled social workers to actually help them to walk through all this traumatic experience. And also lacking in support of rebuilding life, as they only provides immediate aids in terms of food and shelter, and they operate as closed shelters, which restricted their movement mainly for security purpose. But this impacts them in terms of losing their jobs and also their livelihood. So in terms of the thesis framework, safe place and shelters provide safety and refuge to the women fleeing domestic violence and in need. Hence, there is a need to remodel the typology of the women's shelter in Malaysia to improve the existing condition. Therefore, this thesis will explore the correlation between the DV survivors and build environment through healing design approach and its ability to assist them to heal from physical and psychological effects from the violence. The theory that is implied is from the Maslow hierarchies of need. It is a theory of motivation that involves 5 levels of model of human needs. From phase 1, the basic needs, phase 2, psychological needs, and phase 3, the self-fulfillment needs, which further derive into the basic needs of the programming, which is the food bank and donation hub, the community kitchen, and emergency shelter as the short-term approach, while psychological needs, self-fulfillment needs, and also the breakthrough, which integrates with the community as the long-term approach. Therefore, it developed into the program intention to provide emotional resilience, physiological resilience, and economic resilience to the women in this home. And it goes into 4 stages when they arrive throughout the journey with the accommodations provided. Stage 2 is for healing and rejuvenate. Stage 3 is empowering them. And stage 4 is reconnecting back to the society and to break the isolation as the typical conventional shelter homes, which usually located in hidden and secret places. So this is the journey experience for the domestic violence survivors, where the physiological needs is taken care with safe place to live and stay away from the abusers. And through healing architecture, the interior spatial narration connected through exterior spaces that impacts the healing process through built environment. And economic resilience in terms of preparing the survivors to live independently through uplifting technical and crafting skills. And towards the goal of empowered community to reconnect with others through community engagement and also gaining the societal support. So the spatial quality that will be integrated is in terms of three major category, which in terms of the safety, healing, and also rebuild, to have a few separate entranceway with layering of space and also natural surveillance, and but in also to taken care of the privacy and transparency in the overall spaces as well. From the healing is we can integrate the greens and nature from the outside to the inside with bright and airy spaces and sustainable design to taken care of their emotional well-being as well. And last but not least, to rebuild through positive energy, free movement without constraint, and also a common ground with social connections. So this is the building development nesting from the site zoning to provide a public and private separation of zoning. The ground floor will be site accessibility with pedestrian friendly, and to have the ageless building form and vertical zoning with higher privacy on the top and lower privacy on the bottom, and also to break the volume and insert reusable green space as part of the sustainable design. So the key selection criteria is to because there's a few of sites that we studied around KL, but at last I've chosen the site on Brickfields. This is due to its diversity of community background with multicultural community, and it's easily accessible, which is contrast to the conventional women home that is not located in the city center, and therefore it is potential to impact the community of the area as well, and so that people will take note of these social issues rather than just to keep them hidden away from the sites. And this is the site plan. Looking into the ground floor, you can see all is fully permeable, which you can walk through from the neighborhood park at the site. And from the ground floor is fully public accessibility with public amenities such as medical centers, one-stop crisis center. There's a donation hub and the cafeteria. However, for the women's home, they actually have a separate entrance at the circular area around here. So it's sort of given them a certain privacy as well. And this is moving up to the first floor, where all the uplifting classes and the community engagement also happens around here, where the locals with the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, integrate together with the community over here to uplift their skills, teach them some art and craft skills, and also some sewing skills, baking skills integrated within this area. And moving up is the typical tower plan with four floors of living units that create a cluster, and therefore they will have a common area at level 8 and level 8 mezzanine to have a common living area. And the tower itself, they will see it's separated into 4 clusters of towers, so they will have like 4 clusters of community within 4 clusters of smaller community within the building. And therefore, the healing paradigm, the phase 1 is to heal through self-contemplation. You can see from up here, through the personal space, they have private accommodation and also self-contemplation area, and breakout space at the open landscape area. Phase 2 is where they go top to bottom. When they are ready, they can, and not too confined with themselves, they will go through the healing through a therapy where the individual treatments and group treatments will be held together. And for phase 3, going down is healing through learning, where they will uplift their skills through tailoring, baking, and vocational skills, and also some public programs throughout this auditorium hall. And lastly, phase 4 is healing through interactions with the community and also public programs. So you can see this is the perspective view from the public access. So it's they can access through this spiral staircase towards the podium private area. And this is the secondary access for the women's home private area, private entrance. And moving on, this is the common living room for the women. As I said, the clusters of the communities on top of the building. And within itself, you also have its own contemplation area, which is more private space for a smaller counseling session. And the central courtyard for community interactions and a sustainable design, sustainable and green designs that integrated within the building itself. So therefore, it's not a totally confined building where you can have more like open airs and ventilations, natural ventilations to go through. And lastly, this is the overall perspectives of the women's home. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Tan. I think it's really well-developed thesis statement and concept. I think it's really a global issue, so it's really well chosen. Thank you very much for your concept outline. Thank you so much. Can you just mute your mic, please? Yeah, okay. So now I would like to invite the following participants from SARA NUST Pakistan, also with a degree of Bachelor of Architecture, Visha Ahmed, to present her thesis project entitled Community Resilience Living with Water. So Visha, the mic with you right now, but please, if you can operate your video and introduce yourself first.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Visha and I'm from NASADA. Today I'll be presenting my thesis for my bachelor's in architecture. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay. Let me just make it full screen. 1 second. One second, let me just reshare.
It's okay.
Okay. So my thesis is called Community Resilience Living with Water, and it's a focus on architecture of duality. So I'll be looking over floods in general, floods within the area, and then my design synthesis. So starting with my concept collage, the idea behind my thesis and the entire thesis statement is to provide a sanctuary to societies through a community and rehabilitative center to focus on flood resilience. The idea is to have architecture of duality. So the idea of having one building that can have two programs and have a transferability based on their user requirement. So when we look at floods, within the area and their conceptual requirements. So we look at the idea of community resilience. So that means resilience on a social, economic, and environmental level. And when you look at it socially, that means making sure that people have the safety that is required and the ability to grow beyond and after floods, but also looking at the economic resilience of how they can economically recover from floods, and then the environmental resilience and how they can actually recover from the physical flood itself. Then moving forward, so we look at natural disasters, and if you look at it in terms of what has happened recently and what has been happening for the past decade. So we look at the ranking system for natural disasters overall. And if you look at Pakistan, so it ranks 8 out of 191 countries for flood risk level. So this is a natural disaster that impacts Pakistan the most. And then when you look at the natural disaster and look at all the different ones that have impacted Pakistan, so you can see the different types of floods and how they have the most amount of people that are affected, and they have a high number of deaths as well as event counts. So the destruction that's caused by floods is kind of very hard to recover from, and our cities right now aren't designed to be resilient to natural disasters. And so what this means is that every time a flood exists, all of the infrastructure is destroyed, and then it's this process where they have to start from scratch all over again post-flood. Again, the infrastructure that's redesigned is not able to sustain floods, and that's why the process kind of keeps going on in a cycle, because there is an environmental consciousness. Floods obviously impact livelihoods, crops, infrastructure, and the economic growth of cities as well. And so a lot of our areas that are dependent on agriculture and rural infrastructure are most heavily impacted by floods. So moving forward into my analysis, so these are flood maps that I created based on data of every documented flood between 2010 and 2021. That's when I did my thesis. And so you can see that 2010 was the highest ever recorded floods that occurred in Pakistan. And you can see the moderate and severely affected areas. And you can see the concentration shift as infrastructure developed in the southern areas of Pakistan. But in the north, you can see how in 2021, that is the area with the most concentration of floods. So moving into that specific province within the north, it's called KPK. And so I looked at the different types of floods that exist. So there's flash floods, riverine floods, glacial lake outbursts. And so within these, you can see that Swat is a region that is vulnerable to all 4 kinds of floods. And so moving forward into Swat itself, so you can see that their flooding hazard zone map basically shows the areas that are have high hazards in terms of floods and low hazards. And you can see how they kind of follow the grain of the rivers and channels that kind of flow through the province. And in yellow is the site that I have chosen. So when choosing my site, I made sure to look at areas that had an elevated and central location. Also had to look at flood frequency in terms of how often a flood exists there and how vulnerable an area is. And then I also had to look on the actual development, how close that is on a floodplain, because floodplains are areas that are most impacted by floods. Normally, construction isn't advised on floodplains, but because of the way that our agricultural industry works, people do develop their cities and villages on floodplains to be close to the agricultural lands and obviously be close to a river as well. And then I also had to look at how community driven the area was. So the space that I selected was in Barabanda Union Council. And so that's basically a council of 3 different villages. And you can see this is Dile village, which is on the floodplain right next to the Sabat River. And you can see sectionally where my site is located as well. This is a hand painting and embroidered piece that I made for my thesis, and it basically kind of shows the craftsmanship that is known for the area in Swat. So they're known for their embroidery, and that's something that a lot of the women in the area do, and it forms a way of social and economic resilience for women as well. So within this painting, you can see that you can kind of understand the grain of the area and see the main agricultural land, see the proximity between the village and the river, and then also understand where my site is located. So to understand how flood resilient architecture works, you have to understand the concept of river discharge. So what happens when there's low discharge in the river and the water is actually within the river boundary. Moderate discharge, it kind of extends further. And when it's high discharge, it comes into a floodplain as well. And that's often what happens in these floods. So you can see it then within the context of my site, and you can see how the actual village is impacted by high discharge floods. So when looking at my village, it is a very small village of just 1,600 people. And looking at the walking radius, you can kind of understand how my site is located centrally and people can easily access my rehabilitation and community center. And so they have the option of easily being able to evacuate no matter where they are within the village and to be able to reach the central safe space within 10 minutes. And so you can see the conditions of the site prior to flooding, and then you can also see what happens after flood levels decrease, and you can see how the actual current infrastructure isn't able to sustain and actually allow water to go back towards the river. So local crafts is a very big part of my thesis because that is something that would provide social and economic resilience for the people. And so they're known for their wooden crafts, their embroidery, their grass baskets, and wooden carving as well. Looking at this axonometric of my site, so you can see the different crops that are within the area. You can see the docks as well as the main little school that's in the area. So an issue within this village is that the school is only for men, so there aren't any girls' schools, and so that's something that I kind of try to incorporate into my building as well. So looking at, a really big part of the thesis was understanding the behavior of water and understanding how water kind of enters the site, but also how it would exit the site. Because at the end of the day, floods aren't preventable, but the idea is to be able to adapt from them and kind of bounce back after a flood has occurred. And so over here, you can see my different strategies that I've used. So the ultimate idea within my strategies is to embrace the concept of floods and see how infrastructure and architecture and landscaping can all work together to provide resilient architecture. So looking at my design synthesis, this is my master plan, and you can kind of get a very big image of the entire village and understand the urban grain as well. So you can see this is the river, and these are the immediate areas that are flooded when there's high river discharge. So my site is at a very large proximity from the immediate river boundary. You can also see that within all the agricultural land and within their development as well, there's channels that have been added. So the idea is that when water comes into the site, it's also channelized out of the site. A very big thing when you're designing for rehabilitation is that with floods, there's the idea of panic and not being able to kind of understand how to immediately evacuate. And you have your belongings, you have people, and then you also have your livestock that you're trying to shelter. And so a really big part of my design is to make sure that my building is designed for accessibility. And so my entire building is fully ramped. So even entering my plinth level, there's ramps on both sides. And there's even a central ramp that takes you up from my ground floor all the way to my second floor as well. So over here, you can see an overview. And then you look into my different programs. So a big thing was because my building basically has two functions. On a regular day, it would function as a community center. And then when a flood occurs, it would become a rehabilitation center. So to kind of combine these two functions, there are different programs that kind of been added. So there's training spaces that are most often used during when the building is a community center. And then there's also health and sanitation. So this is a function that's used in both community and rehabilitation. And then there's livestock shelter. So of course, with floods, you try to preserve human life, but a big part of their economy is livestock. So if you preserve as much of that as possible, you kind of create more resilience for them. And so livestock shelter has been accommodated within my building as well. So this is kind of a conceptual axonometric of my design. So this is what my building kind of would be zoned as when you have flood level 0, so it essentially be a community center. So my entire building is raised one floor up, so that kind of creates this entire area for them to have exhibition spaces to kind of come together for their crafts and kind of use this public zone. And then because gender segregation is also a very big thing in this province, I've zoned my building that way as well. So there's a male dedicated social zone on the mezzanine floor, as well as the health wing you'll see that kind of keep its function throughout all of the different variations of the building. Then there's an entire learning floor that kind of glues the building together. And then on the highest floor, there is a female zone. So when the flood level is from 3 to 6 feet, my functions actually adapt higher. So the ground floor becomes a livestock area where the shelter can exist. And then all of my other areas become shelter spaces, with the health wing still having its main function. And then when the flood level is from 7 to 10 feet, because my ground floor right now is at 6 feet, when the flood level exceeds that, so you have a capacity of bringing your livestock within this mezzanine floor as well through the centralized ramp system. So again, the livestock can be sheltered on the mezzanine during a 3 to 6 feet flood level. So within my axonometric, you can see kind of the ramp system that connects my building centrally. So a big idea within the zoning and planning of my building was designing through very easy circulation. So when someone is entering the building in a mass panic, they should be able to kind of circulate through the building and immediately understand where they need to go. So you can see within my mezzanine floor, this is my health wing. And then large areas like these, like the male zone, all of these classrooms have adaptable walls and sliding features that allow for adaptation in the program. And so that's why these areas, while it will be a learning floor during a community center, it can become an entirely shelter-based space during a flood. So over here, you can kind of see my adaptations and kind of understand the difference between when it's a rehabilitation space and an exhibition space. So like on my ground floor, the area can be a livestock shelter during a flood, but then it can also transform into an exhibition space through very easy means of kind of adding your exhibits on from the waffle slab and having features that can easily be removed as well. So that's kind of how the ground floor adapts. And then within the mezzanine floor, my and first floor as well as my areas like classrooms can adapt into shelter spaces. So an idea in this was that the furniture would be designed in a way where the tables can open up and form the platforms for the beds. And as well as I have folding walls and sliding features as well that kind of create larger halls for shelter spaces. So within one area, you're able to have 2 different functions depending on your requirement. And then even on my first floor, I have hujra spaces, and those can also transform into shelter areas. So you can look at it sectionally. You can understand what my community center would look like when it's functioning on a regular day. So you have all your classrooms, your library, your entire learning floor, and then you have your female zone, as well as your medical ward. And then when it's a rehabilitation center, you can see that all of the livestock can be sheltered on this raised platform. And then have all of your shelter spaces above. So a big part of my thesis was understanding the technical details and structural structural integrity of the building. And so a big part of that is if a lot of water is coming in, how can spaces adapt and where can water be stored? So I do have features within my landscaping that kind of, they're platforms that are able to raise. So when there's a flood, you kind of increase the surface area where you can have more people and have more things that are protected from water. And so with this feature, this platform could raise through the barrels, and you can see the flood water would kind of be underneath within this retaining area. And then as the water dissipates through the channelizations, the platform will go back down as well. And so there's a very easy adaptation that doesn't require mechanical and electricity. So that's something that's kind of been considered throughout the design. And then the idea of a raised platform, so making sure that the whole building is raised to a sufficient level to prevent water from entering the building in the first place. And then moving on into drainage lines as well. So because my building is raised up to 7 feet, there's channelization that has been designed to kind of drain water out of the site and back into the river. Again, this is an overview of my design. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Visha, for the interesting project and the interesting solution for the flats. Actually, I find it really interesting. Thank you very much for your presentation. And finally, I would like to invite our last participant from SADA and UST Pakistan, with also a degree of Bachelor of Architecture, Sonalia Haidar, to present her thesis project entitled Placemaking in Architecture, Multidisciplinary Professional Hub. So yes, I pass the mic for you.
Okay, thank you so much. But please let me know if you guys can see my screen.
Yes, everything is clear.
Okay, so my name is Vanilla Heather, and my project is called Multidisciplinary Professionals Hub, Placemaking and Architecture. So this is the overview of the contents that I'll be covering, which include site analysis, master plans, some micro details, axonometrics, facade details, and interiors. So I'm going to start with an overview of what the project is basically about, since considering current times, and urban sprawl is a very common problem, along with greenhouse gas emissions. So it calls for a need of a high density structure and high-rise buildings to ensure that the degradational environmental practices that are being practiced because of unsustainable design practices can be solved. And then, so my project basically is a modular high-rise that tackles the issue of greenhouse gas emissions and carbon footprint to sort of provide a solution to ensure the relevance of human scale is maintained, and it also implements the strategies and techniques of passive design, including natural ventilation and daylighting. So in order to giving an overview of the site is basically located in the capital city of Islamabad. It's called F10. It's a corner plot. It has natural contours. It has really interesting views of Margala Hills. As you can see, the contextual views that are showed here. F9 Park is right next to it. We have a residential context. We also have commercial. It's actually located on a very prime commercial belt. So the reason for choosing this site was so that this project sort of is visible, and it sort of stands out in an area where this problem is actually crucial, the urban sprawl and detrimental design practices that we can see. So this is a site model that sort of shows the residential area, the commercial belt, the contours on the site, F9 Park, and the natural existing vegetation on the site as well. It also, coming on to the master plan, the building has been bifurcated in two parts, and it has been one of the primary things that were a very crucial part of designing the master plan was the orientation of the plan towards north-south. And the reason was because since the orientation of the site is such that this allows the creation of extroverted and introverted courtyard spaces. And you can see how the modules have been arranged along with both the masses and introverted courtyards are visible within the central zone. You can also see a pedestrianized zone and a public space, a public area, which shows seating spaces, some external sports areas, a running track, and also an outdoor amphitheater, which I'll discuss later. So this is actually a view of this specific zone in the master plan, which shows the design of the communal space and outdoor activity area, because since it's a multidisciplinary professionals hub, so it has a huge diverse group of users. So it ensures that it caters to all and the requirements of all, including seating spaces, running tracks, sports areas, and along with a zone that is reserved for vendors and kiosks to ensure economic diversity and ensure the economic opportunity for everyone. So this is basically the drop-off and the experiential zone as you enter the building itself to ensure that part is itself well designed and caters to the relevance of human scale and the concept of placemaking. Coming on to the outdoor amphitheater space, which is actually a sunken area right beneath this wing of the building. You can see the visualization of the outdoor amphitheater. It also serves as a communal space for people of all ages and diverse user groups to maximize social interaction, and the use of artificial lighting basically adds to the safety and usability aspect of the space at all times of the day. Now we can see that since, as I discussed earlier, and since the title says that it's a multidisciplinary professional hub, that means it has the professionals from various fields, and it's going to have some of the professionals may have families, may have children. So this sort of responds to the needs of seating spaces. And since Islamabad experiences climates at all sorts of climates, like really hot summers, it's going to be cold winters, maybe having a fire pit, maybe having some water bodies that surround seating spaces to be surrounded by seating spaces actually ensures a variety in the ambient aesthetics of the space, and a herb garden to actually serve as a communal node as well, and bring together people from the community and actually add to the green and well-being element of the space itself. So this is basically the plan view of the central pedestrianized and pedestrianized zone, which is the primary communal pocket, and it's also a transition zone to ensure enhanced user experience. But when you're actually passing through towards the retail or the commercial floors, or in general, just going, or in general for a kiosk as well. So you can see that this is basically designed very symmetrically with a central water body for rainwater harvesting as well. And it has these spaces that are under the shade of the tree to ensure protection from harsh daylighting. And obviously, since it's basically in the middle of both the masses and both the towers, it actually serves as a visually interesting node as well between the two spaces as well. Now, this is again one of the view of from one of the corners of this central zone, and it basically shows how various layers of the structure of the design can be seen. You can see the porosity and the connectivity between the central introverted courtyards that are the transitional spaces towards the central court, the extroverted courtyards. You can also see the staircases, the viewing balconies. You can also see the various layers of structure to ensure that even in the transition and even in the experiential area, you can sort of connect with nature itself, with the views of Margilla Hills. You can see the hustle and bustle of everyday life in the ground floor. You can also see sort of people interacting in upper floors in these spaces in the transition zone, and make that not to ensure that it's not an enclosed caged core, but rather a very welcoming space that has a lot of porosity, natural ventilation, daylighting, and it sort of responds to the various parameters of the consideration. So this is also a view of this specific space, but it sort of shows the connectivity between the vendor kiosk and the circulation spaces and the water body area. And you can see how the scale of vegetation and the choice of plants has also been varied to ensure the central focal point remains, the central zone and the central water body sort of remains the focal point of the whole area. However, nothing overpowers and no element sort of overpowers the other. This is again another view of the same space to show the hierarchy and symmetry and how the green element, or how a tree or any green element is sort of always the focal point of the space. So these basically ensure that pedestrianization and the element of, since the site was naturally contoured, so this also sort of ensures that the pedestrian experience is highlighted in all places. Now, this zone is again right adjacent to the central zone, that central pedestrian communal zone that was highlighted. You can see how lighting has been used and how visual connectivity has been created between the hierarchy of different spaces, like how the introverted courtyard responds to the extroverted courtyards and how the context also sort of is visible in the background. So the contours of the site have been instead of clean slating the site, it was very important for me to actually respond to the natural topographical features and create micro-terracing as an opportunity to design experiential, threshold, and transition spaces for users, and ensure creation of north-facing courtyards for optimum and diffuse daylighting and not harsh lighting. This is another view of the space, and you can see the variety of vegetation and plants that have been used. You can see how, since it's to ensure accessibility for everyone, we have provided ramps and these spaces for everyone. So this is a holistic view of the farm itself. It shows the offset between modules and how vegetation and green element is an integral part of it, how the special focus has been given to ventilation voids, solar consideration, and to ensure the element of sustainability. Now, in order to design this and define where the voids are going to be, where the communal pockets are going to be, where the open and porous green pockets will be, where the shaded louvered green wooden decks would be, the consideration of wind directions was a very important element, along, especially for the commercial floors and the residential floors alike, to ensure optimum air quality and minimum dependence on artificial lighting sources. For instance, double skin facades in the commercial floor and voids have been generated between modular residences. Now, I'm going to show the studies of facade and double skin later on. However, I'm going to discuss the exploded axonometric right now, where you can see how the two towers respond to each other, how the modules have been aligned, how the circulation spaces are also highlighted in very porous, again, to ensure ventilation at all times and minimum dependence on artificial sources of energy. And here in the conceptual sketches, you can see how the initial ideas have been translated into the final product and final form itself. You can see the roof gardens that are responding to the intangible aspects of the site, like Margula Hills. You can see the batic spaces or seating spaces on the ground floor that are responding to the natural topographical feature and parameters of the site, like the contours, and to ensure well-being of users and provide shading from the element of solar shading. And here, how the transitional spaces and circulatory spaces have also been utilized, for example, as you can see in the periphery of the form and on the ground floor level, to ensure maximized user experience and to ensure the dimension of human scale and placemaking to activate the transition spaces with seating pockets. So you can also, another element that can be seen in this axonometric is the solar roof and also the central core and the introverted courtyards and the various bridging that sort of connects and not alienates the two towers. So here I've also considered the element of future expansion and modularity to ensure that the tower and the building responds to needs of the residents in times to come as well. So you can see some of the modules are 2-story high and they're completely enclosed. However, some of them have these frameworks that have open spaces and the opportunity to actually expand as per the needs of residents later on. And now between the two towers that are connected, the bridges that are connecting the two towers, you can see how the elements of porosity, visualization of natural daylighting and ventilation is again highlighted, and a connection to the context is also generated that sort of frames the views in the context. And the building not only has a contrasting nature, contrasting form compared to the buildings in the context, but it still does not dominate the structure itself. So here, this is the study of the facade and the study of the form to ensure the offsetting, how it's going to respond to the various requirements of natural ventilation, daylighting. It's also going to, you can also see the various scale and proportion, the variety of scale and proportion and the structural elements and the louvers, design elements and the element of vegetation, the green element in the facade itself. So this is actually a blow up into one of these larger voids that you can see here. And here also I've provided seating spaces and green decks and seating spaces for people, and lighting has also been provided within these voids to ensure the element of placemaking and human scale. So these are also these also serve as breathing spaces and viewing decks for the context and for the activities that are going on the ground floor level, and sort of highlight the various layers of the structure itself. So this is the physical model that again highlights the various textures that are present in the model, in the form, the various hierarchies that are present. And you can see the commercial floor has a different orientation as compared to the modules in the residential floors. So there's a reason behind them, because we have different spatial requirements, different planning requirements for the commercial floor, and different daylighting and ventilation requirements for both residential and commercial floors. For example, for offices, we need diffuse lighting. So they're going to have a different orientation and different requirement responding to the solar path, while the residential areas and modules are going to have a different orientation, a different requirement, because they need daylighting all times of the year. So this is again a study of the double skin facade, which sort of highlights and highlights the various requirements of daylighting and ventilation for both office and retail spaces. Okay. So this is a view, a close-up into the reception area and the foyer area of both the cores of the towers. Now you can see it's a double-heighted space to ensure that it's very welcoming and it's not an enclosed core like a typical core. So it has, again, visual connectivity, elements of porosity. It also has the provision of artificial lighting for the users. And this is again another view from the double-heighted space. And distant view, how you can, in this render, you can basically see the connection between the extroverted courtyard and the introverted courtyard, and how they all come together as one in connection to the core as well. Now, on a view on the inside, this basically highlights how the modules have been arranged and how the spaces have been created for ventilation between the modules themselves. You can see various textures, various materials. You can see public spaces, private spaces, circulation spaces, the green decks that have been created, and various layers of structure and detail, and the skins for ventilation and daylighting again. This is a similar view of the space, and that would be it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Sunalia. It's really impressive how you have been developed your concept into the forms and all these levels, the ventilation and so on. It's really impressive. Thank you very much for your presentation. And of course, thank you very much for all of our students and participants today for their contribution to make this happening today. Really interesting presentations and project. We appreciate your participation. And now, before we end up, I would like to invite Dr. Sarhani Muhammad, the coordinator for our master program, to give her final speech. And after that, we would like also to pass the mic to Sada and UST to give the final speech before the end of our session today. Yes, Dr. Wan, the mic with you.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum to our newly found friends and to our students as well. I know it's already late. It's already past 7 here, 7:10. Time for our Maghrib prayers. I've seen so many great projects presented from our students as well as from SADA themselves. I'm actually amazed to see many great projects, and even one of the project has I think about 2 or 3 has similar issues, of which our TC students are doing. Just to correct the Dr. Sarah, I'm not the master's coordinator. I'm just part of the year 5 lecturers in thesis. So I take care of the master's thesis students now. So just to cut things short, I know I was told to do it shortly. I would like to say thank you to all the participants, to Sada, to Dr. Sarah, to our department, and on behalf of our students and also ex-students who actually joined us, to say thank you for spending time with us. And I'm hoping that there will be something more than just an online event. So perhaps there will be a visit from SADA to UPM or UPM to SADA soon. So maybe we can work out something on that part. Okay, so thank you so much and hope to see you guys soon. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wan. Really very short and nice talk from you. I really happy when I see your face on cam and everywhere else, really know that. Okay, so now we pass the mic to Sada to give the talk from them, the final one. Yes.
Yes, can you hear me? Well, thank you, Dr. Sarah, for moderating the session for today, and thank you all to the student who present their work and also the participant who listen them patiently. Looking forward to have more such kind of collaboration in future, maybe face to face. So maybe we can come, or the UPM team can come for further collaboration. That's all from my side. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed, and hopefully my students here, the participants, they have enjoyed a lot, and they learned from this session. Thank you again to you. Thank you, the UPN team.
Thank you very much, Architect Safiullah. And now, ladies and gentlemen, students and academic, we have come to the end of our seminar today. Thank you very much for your kind contribution, participation, and time with us today. I really enjoyed the seminar, and I was really pleasure to moderate such seminar. Also, we hope to see more collaboration between the two universities, UPM and NUST, Pakistan, in the near future, in both teaching and also in research activities. So Once again, hope to see you soon, and please share and join us in Facebook and YouTube and share our links. And thank you very much. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you. Thank you, Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamualaikum.